and what to do with the ventilators and the PPEs. So from where we started and what we built up in those 2 years, it is actually a lesson to us what we are capable of. And here I would also particularly mention the contribution of the diaspora, because in 2021, when we went through the Delta wave, really, I would say the world stood by us, but Indian communities everywhere abroad really contributed, did whatever they could to help us out, and that's something which we deeply appreciate. Now, 2 years of COVID, 2.5 years of COVID, we then found ourselves with a new challenge, and a challenge which came from a very different geography. This time it was the Ukraine conflict, the consequences of the Ukraine conflict on our daily lives. And it actually tells us really how globalized the world has become, that something happens in one corner of the world and everybody else is impacted by it. And here too, there was a human side to it. The fact that there were 20,000 students who were stuck in Ukraine, but who we were very determined we would bring back unharmed. Unfortunately, one person did lose his life. But we were the country actually who brought out the largest number of people through an organized effort once the conflict started. And that too, Operation Ganga that we did, that too was, even for our own society, a validation of capabilities and leadership and thinking and boldness and commitment and organization. That to put all this together in the middle of a war, to get people out, it was something which really was quite a feet. But today we are coping with other aspects of it, and I think particularly what it has done in terms of impacting our energy security is something which is of concern. And here too we have a challenge, which is we have to ensure through diplomacy, through dealings with various governments, that our economic interests are well protected, that the Indian consumer is shielded to the extent possible from this enormous jump in oil prices that we have seen, that our national economy is not adversely impacted by this. And it is something which is still ongoing. But again, there has been a very strong level of commitment to ensure that our national interests in regard to energy are somehow met. Now, I started with these two because obviously as a foreign minister, these have been my major preoccupations in the last 3 years. It's something obviously very much in my mind. But I also want to share with you what's happening at home. I don't know how many of you have been able to go home this year. Last 2 years, I understand, would have been very difficult. And even if you went home, it's probable that you went home, met your families, went to that immediate town, and then came back. Now, as someone who travels within the country, I'd like to give you, in a sense, that picture. Now, I again go back to the COVID. When we had the lockdown, when we had the enormous disruption of the COVID, one of the big concerns that the Prime Minister reminded us of was that 100 years ago, when the Spanish flu hit India, more people died of hunger than they died of the flu. And he was absolutely determined this would not happen on his watch. So what we did during these 2 years was really put the digital backbone which had been erected, measures which had been taken with some degree of foresight, For example, the idea that everybody should have a bank account, Jan Dhan Yojana. Now, because people had a bank account, because everybody had a Aadhaar number, because there were other ways of ensuring digitally that we were able to communicate with the citizens in an effective manner. We have actually, through this entire COVID period, right up to this point, under the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, we continue to provide food to 800 million people. The scale of that has never been done in the world before. It's not something you read often in the newspaper. In our own country, once it moved, people took it as, it happened. They absorbed it, they internalized it. Because people had bank accounts. Actually, the government was putting money directly into 400 million accounts regularly, of which the vast majority were women. Now, this 800-400 story, the story which you don't read about in the papers, is really what has kept India going. That we did not have what we could have had, the accompanying economic distress from the COVID lockdown. So when people wonder sometimes, how did we come back to normalcy so quickly? Why is it that there is a bounce back? At the heart of it is that we actually, between health, between food, between direct cash payments, we were actually able to create a massive social security net based on this digital backbone, almost on the run. And that is one of the big transformations that has taken place in India today. It's not the only transformation. In fact, in parallel with that, there are a range of other activities which are taking place. Some of them you would have heard of, like replacing firewood with cooking gas. Some of them, if you're not directly a beneficiary, maybe you read about it. Today, we are really providing houses in the millions, both in the rural areas and in the urban areas. The health coverage, Ayushman Bharat, is growing very, very rapidly. The support to farmers is also something. And in fact, when I look at the scale of these programs, and these are programs which is what we do when we travel about in India, we look at it, we monitor it, we speak to the beneficiaries of it, we get complaints about it, which we give as a feedback to our colleagues or to the Prime Minister. Each of these programs is almost the size of the beneficiary's size of a big country. Many of them, the food, for example, is as big as Europe and North America put together, 800 million. The finance is as big as Europe. Even if you look at two big programs which are going on, one more advanced, the power connection to every house, and the other one which is going on right now is tap water connection. Now, there are parts of the world where people don't understand what that means because they were born with an electricity connection and born with tap water. So the idea that you didn't have it itself doesn't occur to them. But for all of you who are so familiar with your country, you know that this itself is a revolution of a kind. And these schemes are today really running into hundreds of millions. And when we look at the future, one of the big objectives is really to shift the baseline of India higher. That in this day and age, in the 22nd century, people should not think of water and power and house and education and health as luxury. They should not have to wait till the end of their working life to say, okay, finally with my savings, I bought a house. That is not really where we should be as we are approaching 100 years of independence. And it's those goals today, which is really what is driving the transformation of India. Now, having spoken to you about India, let me say a few words about India and Brazil because that is why I'm here. Uh, Politically, we have had good relations for a long time. They've become better. I had the privilege of welcoming President Bolsonaro when he had come to India. And I can say that after the visit, as the ambassador pointed out, there's really been a kind of a focus and a energy in the relationship, which perhaps there was not earlier. So, how do we look at the relationship? When I go to Brasilia, my message in a way is that for us, Brazil is a key partner. But Brazil is also a country from whom there are many learnings for India. There are experiences and best practices in Brazil from which we could benefit. And in a sense, when I say we are a partner, I mean, obviously, being a partner means you do more business. Uh, that is today the basic index of how well a relationship is doing. But there are other aspects to it. It's also the cultural bonding. It is the civil society, the software areas, education, science, and technology. But our sense of that partnership is where do we, India and Brazil, how can we actually support each other so that in our respective rise in the global order, we can be of help to each other. So that is really the mindset with which we are today looking at the relationship. Now, starting with trade, I think it's going up. It's been a good year. It's been a good 2 years actually. But clearly, the more you do, the more the vistas open up. So for me today, when I look at Latin America as a whole, our trade account is a little bit below $50 billion. When I compare it to some other big regional hubs like ASEAN or the Gulf, leave alone Europe or North America, those are $100 billion plus accounts. So, I mean, this sounds a bit corporate, so you will smile at it. But I think our target really should be how do we double this? How do we make Latin America a $100 billion account, trade account? And the heart of that is Brazil, because it is the biggest economy. It is the one which for us is the strongest fit. And for Brazil itself, the immediate target is to reach a $15 billion level. But clearly, I think we need to think bigger, and that too is a message that I would be carrying. This related to that is investment. And again, I mean, there are many of you in the room who've been here for some time, who are doing great work. I see whether it is power, whether it's agriculture, whether it's pharma, whether it's IT. From our side, our areas of strength are here. I actually looked at my briefing books and looked at the list of companies who have a footprint in this country, and it's a very good list. But it is still a list where the footprint is there, but the footprint isn't big enough, it isn't deep enough, and we understand it will take time to grow. So I do want to tell the Indian businesses in the room that we are committed really to supporting you. We know that business grows only by having its problems addressed. We have been quite energetic in that regard. In fact, I do expect issues of market access and any other impediments to business to be raised. If there is any concern you have, I would like to hear it also at the end of this meeting. The third, of course, is energy. Energy in this country, both in terms of fossil fuel, and we've had OVL and BPRL here for some time. BPRL is scaling up its commitment. But there is the whole ethanol story. We are the third largest ethanol producer. I think there's a natural synergy with Brazil in making actually ethanol much more global. If the number three producers really get together and propagate the virtues of ethanol and really make it a much more universal commodity, I think there's a convergence there. Uh, our dealings on defense have gone up. Again, that we've started some joint ventures there. Space has been an area. Last year, we launched a Brazilian satellite. We use Brazilian ground stations for our own space missions. And then, of course, again, as the ambassador mentioned, my colleague Purushottam Rupalaji was here recently. Animal husbandry is an area really there's a lot for us to learn from Brazil. Uh, and then there are some areas which we have, we've kind of explored it, but there's such visible potential that it clearly is begging for a bigger effort on our part. And I think traditional medicine there is something which is high in our priority. The WHO actually this year has just announced its first global traditional medicine center, which is to be set up in Jamnagar in Gujarat. So we see ourselves really becoming a kind of a global hub for traditional medicine. And Brazil, again, is a natural partner for that. And finally, of course, given the diversity of India and given the diversity of Brazil, I think the cultural, there is a cultural synergy there. It's important for the relationship to go that we should have a better sense of each other's cultures and traditions. Now, that's where the narrow relationship itself is concerned, or the bilateral relationship is concerned. But we work with Brazil in terms of world politics as well. We are right now in the Security Council. We are both members of BRICS. We are part of another grouping called IPSA. So in many ways, this is a relationship of good sentiment, of great goodwill. Till now, it has been a relationship of some distance. So our job today, our task today, is really how to shrink that distance, and to shrink that, and it's doable. It's doable because, in fact, the more business we do, that itself is a statement that distance is shrinking. The idea today that it's possible to competitively export and import to the other end of the world, that I think is by now well established. So it could be oil, it could be edible oil, it could be fuel oil, it could be consumables, it could be auto parts. The world is getting more efficient in terms of its logistics. Our vision of who our partners are should grow beyond the region. In a way, definitely I can say India is becoming much more globalized. Our effort is to encourage Brazil also to look beyond their traditional markets, look much more at Asia, particularly look much more at India. So for me, when I look at the development of the relationship at its prospects, the role of the Indian community will become even more important, because eventually that shrinking of distance, that expansion of comfort, that sense of putting a face to a country or a company, that is something which all of you do. And I have seen in different parts of the world where I have been, that when relationships really remarkably change, a big part of it is really the catalytic role of the community, because the policy makers or the doers in the other partner society, for them, they relate to Indians, they relate to communities like you, they relate to individuals, they relate to companies. And that fires them up and encourages them really to do bigger things than they were doing habitually. So for all of you, I would urge you that, please keep doing what you're doing, but do more. Please think of yourself as, contributors at a very important stage of our relationship. We are really today poised to make that big jump. And to make that big jump, we need all the support that we can get. And back home, as I said, I want to assure you today, we have a government with a vision. We have clearly in Prime Minister Modi a government with a leadership, one with a very strong sense of delivery. As I said, a lot of it is really the transformation of India is no longer in phrases. It is actually visible in numbers. It is evident on the ground. Anywhere you travel in India today, you can actually literally see change underway. There's a road being built, there's a rail line being built, there's some container depot coming up. You can almost sort of feel the hum and the buzz of that change. So it is with that sense of optimism, that feeling of hope that I share with you this evening. Once again, I want to say it's truly a great pleasure to be able to spend time with all of you. And I'm very glad I'm doing this so that it empowers me as I go into Brasilia. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Next participant is Tushar Parekh from TCS.
Good evening, sir. Very warm welcome to Brazil. And I have assisted some of your interviews and forums where you given a lot of questions about Ukraine, US, China. So I want to congratulate that, sir, with all your response which you have given. And that makes us really proud, sir. So salute to you, sir. I am Tushar Parekh. I represent TCS, Tata Consultancy Services. We have around 5,000 people. We are like completing 20 years. In Latin America, we have around 24,000 people. So we have business in 9 countries in Latin America. Actually, my question you already answered in your speech, but I will try to double click on what you expected as a target. 15 billion for Brazil, 50 billion for Latin America. Sir, how India, when I say India as a corporate and also as per your vision from ministry, see Brazil as a country? You explain all the things in your speech, but maybe double clicking on that answer about 15 billion, 50 billion, how we can do more or shrinking this gap more as per your vision on day-to-day basis, sir. That is one question, and I have another question, but I will hold for that.
Well, look, I'll give you a very interesting happening in the last year. We were big importers of sunflower oil from Ukraine, and obviously that has got disrupted. We have seen in this year, this calendar year, a big jump in soya oil imports from Latin America. 5 years ago, people would not have thought of sourcing edible oil from a destination this time. Even Ukraine was seen as far. For them, it could have been Malaysia, Indonesia, palm oil. That's like the natural place to go to, maybe a little bit further. So the same thing is actually happening even in terms of crude. We are buying crude from, we were buying in the past from Venezuela. We now started to buy from Guyana, Brazil, Argentina, Colombia. So I think as our own logistic capabilities are improving, as our understanding of the markets is improving, as our companies get more comfortable going out, our sense of the global economy has become strong. I don't, I myself actually, I know this place theoretically. Okay. I read a lot of analysis. I get visitors. This is the first. I mean, it's only my second time I've been to Latin America. I came here once 25 years ago, not here, but in Chile. But what I read, in many ways, there is a middle class demand. Yeah. It's a very good fit for Indian companies. So, if you look at the two-wheeler market, you look at the auto, small car market, you look, actually, there are, I mean, look at your own business. Yeah. So, my sense is we haven't made that push. You know. When we start to make that push, I'm confident we will be surprised because I'm seeing that in some other geographies that they were new to us. We went in with a little bit of hesitation. Everybody wants to go where everybody's been before. It's good. But if all of you can actually increase the pull factor from it, if you go back to your companies and keep telling them there are things to do here, there are prospects here. I assure you from our side, we actually believe this market, the Latin American market, does require a greater focus. We are very determined to crack it. We have set much higher targets even in trade. We are reaching out in a way which we have not done before to Latin American governments. So I would be bullish, but I'm also realistic in the sense that I know there's a lot of hard work required.
Thank you, sir. And the second one, on a lighter note, last week for 2-3 days I was in India. I could not buy a book in hard copy to get your autograph. So I wish maybe next trip when you come, we can have that autograph from you on the book. But any...
By the way, I'm just going to be releasing the Gujarati edition next month.
Thank you, sir.
I'll be happy to send you out.
Thank you, sir. And for that, based on that book, sir, any key message you want to pass to all of us from that book?
Look, I wrote that book. Actually, I wrote the book when I was with Tata Sons. But I was ready to publish it, and then, one fine day, to my own surprise, I became a minister. So I then had to say, okay, do I really put out my thoughts in that way? So I had to rework that book a bit, which took another year. But my intent of writing that book was to try to get people not in foreign policy business. People in the, two of us talk to each other, we make it very complicated for other people. We need to communicate easier, simpler, make people understand what is foreign policy about, why is it important. I mean, that's why when I go around in India, I usually go a lot to universities. And I tell them, I said, look, a conflict started in Ukraine, and just imagine, suddenly 20,000 young Indians got caught up. So it's important, it's necessary today to take more interest in the world. I mean, 2.5 years ago, we read something happened in Wuhan. Who imagined that all of us in the world would then. So I think it's opportunities, it is challenges, it is problems, it is worries. It's important in our country we develop a greater sense of it. That's the reason I.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Jani Nair.
Hi, it was a pleasure listening to your articulate way of telling us what India is doing recently and all the plans and things. Now, this may be something which is very much for the embassy or the consulate, but since I do not work with the trade, I run a non-profit organization for travel for people with disabilities. So I want to ask you something which is very dear to people who live here, the Indians who are here. is there any movement in getting a dual nationality set up for Indians, or that is not at all? Because I read once a few years back that somebody had put up in the parliament that it should be taken into account. And another question I wanted to ask is, I read in the MEA, the Ministry of External Affairs, that there is a fund called Indian Community Welfare Fund. So could you explain what would be the criteria? Because there were several occasions when people, Indians, got cheated, and I'm really surprised that they got cheated with all the information that you can get on over the internet. They came here and they were stranded here with no money, no place to live, and they cannot work also. So they were going to be sent back and they would lose their passport, and they were around 20, 30 years of age.
The first one, look, to be honest, I don't think the thinking in the country right now is towards dual citizenship, because it raises a lot of issues. What we have tried to do is to address the same issues through the OCI system, which is mainly, dealing with this, the target audience would be the same data, which would be people of Indian origin who live abroad, because they would be the kind of people who would also be seeking dual citizenship. So I think the OCI card system is what has been working. We keep trying to improve it. It seems to be working reasonably well, because it allows the most important convenience which people want, which is the ability to travel in and out very freely. On the Indian Community Welfare Fund, yes, this was a fund which has been there for some years. In 2017, we kind of expanded its usage. Essentially, the fund is meant for the key is means testing. We want it really to be used in distress situations for people who clearly don't have the means to respond to that. So it could be a worker caught up somewhere, somebody looking for urgent legal representation, that kind of. It would be, say, stranded people would be covered if they had a means issue. But I think maybe Ambassador, this particular set of topics.
No, sir. This has not really come to our attention.
Oh, this was a few years back. Recently, I have not kept in touch with them. There was the person who was bringing these people under false pretenses. He has emigrated, luckily, to Canada. So now it's Canada's problem. So, and I would like to add that even though I came here in 1979, I still hold my Indian passport. I will not give up my passport.
Good for you.
The next question comes from Manik Jaspal.
Thank you. Good evening, sir. Zavio. Good evening, everyone. And I would like to welcome you all on behalf of us, our Indian community, beautiful community over here. Tonight, we really have a privilege of saying that we stand on giants' shoulders. And so my question to you, based on your experience as our ambassador in China and having specific insight to their behavior, is with China literally growing its boundaries, its borders in South China Sea with its debt trap policy, how are we, Indo-China, how are our relationships with them for the next foreseeable future?
Well, they are our neighbor. And everybody wants to get along with their neighbor. In personal life and in country-wise as well. But everybody wants to get along with their neighbor on reasonable terms. I must respect you, you must respect me. So, from our point of view, we've been fairly clear that, if we have to build the relationship, then there has to be mutual respect. Each one will have their interests, so, we must cater for it, and we need to be sensitive to what the concerns are of the other party. So any relationship, and, it's not just between countries, it's even between people. For a relationship to be built, relationships are a two-way street. You know, Lasting relationship cannot be a one-way street. So we need that mutual respect, we need that mutual sensitivity, we need that mutual interest. And that is the basis for building it. Right now, I think it's no secret, we are going through a very difficult phase, and mainly because we have agreements with China going back to the 1990s, which prohibits bringing, massing troops in the border areas. We have disregarded that. You know what happened in Galwan 2 years ago. So that problem has not been resolved, and that is clearly casting a shadow.
Thank you, sir.
Umesh Mukhi.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for wonderful insights. I'm Dr. Umesh Mukhi at Foundation Getulio Vargas as a professor of management. And I have an honor to say that we have been conducting intense India-Brazil related academic programs for Brazilian students. And actually, in partnership with Embassy, we have launched India-Brazil magazine. It's actually first of its kind, which has been launched in Brazil with an academic institution. Nevertheless, without losing the time, my question is very straightforward. In contrast with pre-2014 and post-2014, since the change in government, how has the foreign policy evolved towards the Latin American and Brazil in specific? So I want to have key highlights, specifically when we contrast before 2014 and after 2014, since Prime Minister Modi assumed power. Thank you very much.
In terms of specifically with Latin America, I would say the pre and post 14, India probably is much more global in its conceptualization of its interests. So there would be much more interest in Latin America from our point of view than there used to be before. But many of the changes are not necessarily changes that result from government. There are changes in policies which then have an impact. I'll give you an example. Ethanol. It was not that we thought, we said, oh, let's reach out to Brazil and therefore have an ethanol policy. We had an ethanol policy because we felt that was necessary for energy security. But because we had a greater focus on ethanol, that drew us closer to Brazil. That was the consequence of that. Similarly, today, for example, we are looking much more at EVs, electric vehicles, and electric vehicles require lithium. So there is again a certain interest out there. But there would be the general connotation as well. As a whole, foreign trade. I think the Modi government has been pushing foreign trade much more aggressively than its predecessors. And that clearly results in a much stronger reach out approach, including so the net impact is much stronger. How, what the thought process was, some of it was specific to Latin America, some of it was general, but ended up in that.
Thank you very much.
कहाँ जाना है, कहाँ आना है, मैं जाऊंगा। मैंने पहले ही कह दिया है कि इस जांच में कुछ नहीं निकल सकता, क्योंकि हमने कोई बेईमानी नहीं की, कोई गड़बड़ नहीं हुई। इसलिए हमें पूरा कॉन्फिडेंस है, इसलिए हमने कहा पूरी जांच में सहयोग करेंगे। हम भी चाहते हैं जांच जल्दी से खत्म होके पूरा ये इनका जो एक्सपोज है ना, जो शोर मचाया है इन्होंने, वो सब एक्सपोज हो जाए कि ये क्यों कर रहे हैं ऐसा।